After being married to Ryan for 10 years, I died on the operating table due to dystocia, but was reborn back to college. I couldn't contain my joy and went to find Ryan, who was confiding his feelings to his friend. I really can't accept that I can't get Lana and can't marry her. Ivy is also very good, she likes you so much, Ryan smiled and said, it's just a high imitation. No matter how similar it is, it's just a fake. If I really stay with her, I will never be satisfied in this life. 01 I have been in love with Ryan for 6 years, married for 10 years, and have a beautiful and lovely daughter. Over the years, we have been loving and harmonious as husband and wife, and I thought Ryan and I would grow old together unexpectedly. When I was nearly 40, I unexpectedly got pregnant. My parents-in-law advised me to give birth to the child, saying that my daughter would be too lonely alone. I didn't want to give birth to the child at first. At the age of 40, I didn't sit well after giving birth to my daughter, and my body was always in a serious state. The doctor actually didn't recommend that I keep the child. But I couldn't resist Ryan's red eyes and begging me. I loved him too much, so I nodded softly. I was in labor without any danger. On the operating table, I was unable to be rescued due to amniotic fluid embolism. In my last moments, I heard the cries of my parents-in-law and parents outside the operating room. But I didn't hear Ryan's voice. Perhaps because of this obsession, I was reborn back to college. 02 My roommate Vivian shook my arm. Ivy, what are you daydreaming about? You're going to be late. She dragged me to the teaching building. My figure was reflected in the glass curtain wall, slender and agile. My face was tender, but full of vitality. Vivian and I both wore denim shorts, revealing thin and white calves. So young and fresh. In my memory, I was severely edematous in the late pregnancy, too much supplementation, and a lot of weight gain, with spots all over my face. I even thought I was ugly, but Ryan never disliked me and was always nice to me. At that time, a distant cousin once jokingly said that when I stood next to Ryan, I looked more like his aunt than his wife. Thinking of Ryan, I suddenly broke away from Vivian's hand. You go first, I have something else to do. Ivy, you are going to skip class to see Ryan again. I ignored Vivian's shouts and turned to rush out. Ryan is 2 grades higher than me and should still be in the lab. I want to see him, right now. When I was going up the stairs, I almost bumped into someone because I was too anxious. Sorry. I didn't even raise my head, apologized and continued to run. Ivy. Huh? I subconsciously turned around, but my steps didn't stop. The boy stood on the stairs, wearing a black shirt and black pants, with sharp eyebrows and eyes, and a face that said keep away from strangers. Xavier. I jumped for joy, turned around and rushed over to give him a big hug. 03 Speaking of which, we haven't seen each other for about 10 years. Since Ryan and I got married, I don't know where this guy has gone. There is no news at all. Liang Zhouyuan and I grew up together as childhood sweethearts, so our feelings are naturally different. But I can't take care of him now. I'm in a hurry to find Ryan. Let's contact each other later. I'm going to find Ryan now. I let go of my hand, and Xavier looked at me with a strange expression and his ears were frighteningly red. But after I said the name Ryan, his eyes suddenly turned cold when he looked at me. There's nothing to contact. He said coldly, turned around and left. I was a little surprised, but I didn't have time to think about it. Geniuses and academic masters are all weird, and Xavier is no exception. When we were playing house when we were young, he even wanted to marry me as his wife, but when we grow up, he always has a surface every time we meet, as if I owe him money. But I'm happy today, because I'm now a super invincible beautiful girl, so I won't bother with him. I walked upstairs in 2 steps and was about to open the door of the laboratory. I suddenly heard Ryan's voice. I really can't accept that I can't get Lana in this life and can't marry her. My feet seemed to be nailed, and the blood in my body froze in an instant. His voice sounded lost and depressed. My buddy comforted him. Ivy is also very good, she likes you so much. Ryan laughed. It's just a high imitation. No matter how good it is, it's just a fake. If I really stay with her, I will never be satisfied in this life. 04 I staggered back a step. Who's outside? Ryan's voice approached, and I turned around and ran without thinking. I ran all the way down the stairs to the dark basement. I squatted down and hugged myself tightly, but I couldn't cry. After thinking for a while, something surfaced little by little. It turned out that Ryan liked Lana. The school beauty, no wonder he holds his composure at the wedding when we got married. I always thought he was too excited to cry. Now I think it was because Lana could only be a bridesmaid and not a bride. In those years, Ryan was very keen to attend class reunions. I thought it was just the vanity of a man who had achieved success. Now I think he just wanted to see Lana. He wanted Lana to see him now and regret this choice. So, did Lana regret it? I suddenly thought of something. I felt unspeakably creepy. Not long after I got pregnant in my previous life, Lana suddenly divorced her husband. After the divorce, she came to Beijing to travel and relax, and I enthusiastically invited her to stay at home for a week. At that time, Ryan complained that it was inconvenient to be intimate with me when there were outsiders at home. At that time, I was so embarrassed that my face turned red, and I scolded him for not stopping during my pregnancy. Later, he really didn't sleep with me during the week Lana was there. I suddenly couldn't help laughing. It should be at that time that Ryan began to plan to renew his relationship with Lana. What's even more tragic is that I was the one who let the wolf into the house. Leaving the laboratory building and walking towards the dormitory, my thoughts have slowly calmed down. According to the timeline of my previous life, Ryan confessed to me today. I like him so much, so I was naturally very happy and agreed immediately. But now, I already know his feelings. I am not a high imitation or a fake. I am Ivy. If I am so unbearable and cheap in Ryan's heart, no matter how much I like him, I can't be with him again. But if I hadn't married Ryan, I wouldn't have my beloved daughter Cherry. In my previous life, I died on the operating table, 1 body and 2 lives. If nothing unexpected happens, Ryan will be with Lana, then what about Cherry? In fact, I have always felt that my parents-in-law are somewhat biased towards boys. Although they also like Cherry, they hope to have a grandson more. If Lana gives birth to another son, I dare not think about how pitiful the child will be without a mother. There were many white roses and candles placed downstairs in the dormitory. As night fell, the candles arranged in a heart shape were lit, and Ryan stood in the middle. He wore a white shirt and black trousers, his eyebrows and eyes were gentle, and many girls around him looked at him with admiration. The moment I saw the scene, my heart seemed to be pierced by a sharp hard object, and it hurt so much that I couldn't breathe. How happy I was in my previous life, how ironic it felt at this moment. But I had even thought about how to pretend to be happy and nodded in agreement. I couldn't bear to leave my daughter Cherry, and wanted to go back to her with all my strength. Ryan also saw me, but his eyes only fixed on my face for a moment, and then he moved away coldly. Then, I saw him holding the bouquet of white roses and walking towards Lana. Lana was surrounded by several girls, like a proud and beautiful swan. In the previous life, Ryan didn't dare to express his feelings until Lana got divorced. But in this life, I suddenly thought of something. Could it be that Ryan also went back to the past like me? He knew that he would be successful in his career and famous 6 years after graduation. He knew that he would always marry the goddess in his heart. So in this life, he planned to take the initiative? There are so many people chasing me, why should I agree to you? Lana did not take the flowers handed over by Ryan. She is beautiful, and there are too many boys in school who are flattering her. Although Ryan is also excellent, his family is mediocre. In her previous life, Lana was picky and dragged it until she was 28, and then she married an ugly second generation. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but laugh at myself. Not long after Lana got married, Ryan proposed to me. It took more than a year before the wedding. At that time, I was almost 29 years old, and Ryan and I had been in love for a full 6 years. He always said that he would marry me only when he earned enough money and bought a big house, and he would not let me down. The fact is that he completely gave up after Lana got married, and reluctantly married me, a high-end fake. Lana, believe me, in less than 10 years, no, at most 6 years, I will make you the happiest woman in the world. Do you have a house and a car in Beijing? Can you afford a house and a car in the future? Ryan, you are indeed very good, but promises are a mirage to me. Lana shook her head, sorry, I can't accept your confession. Ryan's face turned gray in an instant. Lana, believe me, at most 6 years. I can't afford the risk. Lana said, turned around and was about to leave. But her eyes suddenly met mine. Ivy. Lana seemed to have thought of something, took 2 steps over, and grabbed me. She pushed me in front of Ryan. Ivy, your junior, has always liked you. You two have always had a good relationship. Ryan, I think Ivy is a good match for you. Why don't you try with her? Ryan's eyes swept across me coldly. After a moment, he said stiffly, Ivy, are you willing? We have been together for so many years, sleeping in the same bed, and having children. But in his heart, I think he has never regarded me as his wife. He held the roses in his hand, his face was cold, and he handed them to me reluctantly. I really wanted to snatch the flowers and throw them hard on Ryan's face. But thinking of Cherry, I held back. If I accept Ryan and let everything get back on track, can I go back to 10 years later? I just want to go back, take my baby daughter away, and love and protect her with everything I have. Huh? A low sneer suddenly came from the crowd. I subconsciously turned around, and Xavier was standing behind the crowd, wearing black clothes like ink, with a stern look in his eyes. The moment he met my gaze, he pushed aside the crowd in front of him and strode towards me. Ryan frowned slightly unconsciously. Xavier didn't even look at him, walked in front of me, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me over. Ivy, things that others don't want are garbage, flowers are like this, and people are even more so. He said, without waiting for me to speak, he looked up at Ryan, have some shame, a bouquet of flowers chasing two people, even Grandette would be inferior. Ryan's face turned pale instantly. But he still gritted his teeth and looked at me. Ivy, I'll ask you one last time, are you willing? In my previous life, I never said no to Ryan. As I got older, my classmates and friends got married and had children. My parents complained privately several times that Ryan had been dragging his feet and not getting married, which made them unable to raise their heads in front of relatives and friends. But I foolishly protected him and spoke for him, and waited until I was 28 years old before he proposed to me. I didn't wear a wedding dress until I was almost 30 years old. I believed everything he said and agreed to do anything he asked me to do. When I was in confinement after giving birth to Cherry, he said we should move to a bigger house to save some money, and not go to a confinement center or hire a confinement nanny. My mother-in-law was not happy because Cherry was a girl, and she almost ignored us during the confinement period. I dragged my wounds from the cesarean section just 7 days ago and got out of bed to take care of myself and my daughter with difficulty. From then on, I was completely sick. I got pregnant again when I was 39 years old. I didn't want to have a baby, and my body didn't allow it. My parents-in-law cried and pressured me, and even my own parents forced me to keep the baby. In the end, it was Ryan who made me compromise. He said, Ivy, just think of it as keeping this child for me. I started to protect the fetus, regardless of the terrifying high-risk words on the checklist. I took countless tonics and pregnancy-protecting medicines, and my whole body was swollen and I gained a full 30 kilograms. There were cracked lines all over my stomach and thighs, which were ugly. At that time, I, a bloated, yellow-faced woman, was foolishly trying to get close to Lana, who was still slim and beautiful. Ryan would only regret not marrying Lana. Thinking of the past, I still felt uncomfortable. I stood there in a daze, and tears fell unconsciously. Until someone around whispered, if you agree to this, you are too much of a dog. You don't know, this girl used to be Ryan's dog. She might be very happy together. You are so excited that you want to cry. I suddenly trembled violently as if I was pricked by a needle. It turns out that in the eyes of others, I used to be so unbearable. Ivy. Xavier seemed to be unable to bear it anymore. Do you have to humiliate yourself like this? Ivy. Ryan's voice also softened. He confessed to Lana so loudly tonight, but was rejected directly. Naturally, it was difficult to back down. But if I, a dog who licks his heart, continue to be shameless and stick to him, he can save some face. Ivy, I know you are a good girl, and what Lana said is right. Maybe we can try to be together. He said this, but he still couldn't help looking at Lana. In that look, there was reluctance, humiliation, and intention. I won't force you, you can think about it slowly. Ryan gently stuffed the flowers into my arms. The hand holding my wrist suddenly loosened. I turned my head to look at Xavier. He didn't look at me, turned around with a cold face and walked away. I lowered my eyes and glanced at the white roses in my arms. I hate white roses, not to mention that they are garbage that others don't want. Ryan watched me throw the bouquet of roses heavily on the ground. He was a little surprised, but more of shame and anger. Ivy. What do you mean? I looked at Ryan, he seemed to be very angry, and his handsome face was slightly distorted. His goddess Lana rejected him, he would only feel unwilling and uncomfortable, not even a bit angry. But my rejection seemed to him like a shameless act, which undoubtedly made him incredulous and furious. Ryan, listen carefully, I don't want to. What did you say? I said, I don't want to be with you, I don't want to fall in love with you, and I don't want to like someone like you anymore. Ivy, don't regret it. Ryan's face was extremely ugly in an instant. I ignored him and turned to walk towards Xavier, who was standing not far away. Since everything in the past was a matter of the last life, then there is no point in letting myself indulge in it. I returned to the age of 21, and I haven't married and had a daughter yet. Without my daughter Cherry in this world, she certainly doesn't have to be the pain of losing her mother, and I don't have to worry about her being treated coldly and bullied by others. If you think about it, you won't have any weaknesses. As for Ryan, Ivy, who is in her 20s, can be in love. But Ivy has lived for more than 60 years and 2 lives. Is there anything else I can't figure out and can't let go of? Peeling off all the false things and seeing the most real him will only make me regret and disgust. Xavier watched me walk to him. I still took his arm directly like when I was a child. Xavier, let's go eat the spicy hot pot at the school gate. I'm starving. Xavier didn't respond, but lowered his eyes to look at my hand holding his sleeve. I thought of his current quirks and wanted to pull my hand back, but he held my wrist. I heard him cough lightly, and his voice was not as cold as before. Spicy hot pot is not clean, I'll take you to eat something else. But I just want to eat spicy hot pot with a lot of chili oil and balsamic vinegar. Xavier looked at me again, okay. Sitting in the small shop at the school gate, I ate with sweat all over my head and enjoyed it very much. But Xavier didn't move his chopsticks much. He just raised his hand to help me pick up my hair when it fell down. Then, he kept that action until I finished eating. I was a little embarrassed, but considering that we have known each other since childhood, I said heartlessly, Xavier, why are you so considerate and caring all of a sudden? Are you in love or do you have someone you like? He looked at me for a while and suddenly stretched out his hand. While I was stunned, he had already gently wiped off the oil stains on the corner of my mouth. Yeah, what do you mean by yeah? Are you in love or do you have someone you like? I grabbed him and refused to give in. Tell me who it is, which beautiful girl conquered you? This is really a rare thing. After all, Xavier is famous for not being close to women in school and is very difficult to deal with. There were quite a lot of girls chasing him in the first 2 years of school, but later, they almost disappeared. It's not time yet, I will tell you later, Xavier. I was so anxious. I am very curious and can't keep things in my heart. Xavier has been calm and steady since he was a child. No matter how I coerce and tempt him, he just won't tell me who his favorite girl is. Forget about telling me. Only a blind beauty will like you, a cold and stinking iceberg. I was a little angry and shook off his hand and walked forward. She was indeed blind before. Xavier suddenly said in a low voice. I couldn't help but look back at him. Xavier? Xavier's eyes fell on my face calmly, and after a while he said, but she is a very good girl. I have never seen such a sad expression on Xavier's face. He has been a cold person since he was a child, and he doesn't care about anything. Now he is like this, he must love that girl very much. You accompany me to study for a month, and I will tell you. Xavier walked to my side, and his arm in the military was slightly bent. I was stunned for a moment. Xavier had already spoken, the road is not easy to walk, hold me. Oh, I responded stupidly and grabbed his arm. He didn't say anything else until he sent me back to the dormitory downstairs. I will come to wait for you to study tomorrow. Oh, go up. I waved at him. Under the dim yellow light, his tall and thin body was like a sharp bamboo. He was only 1 year older than me, but his eyebrows and eyes already showed an unstoppable spirit. I knew Xavier would be a great man in the future. On the way back to the dormitory, I was still wondering who the girl he liked was. After all, in my previous life, I never heard of him being in love or getting married. The next day, Xavier came to wait for me downstairs of the dormitory. I felt a little uncomfortable when I went downstairs with my school bag. Xavier was very famous in the school. Although he was aloof and ignored almost any girls, he couldn't resist the aura of a god of study. And that face that made people and gods hate him. Xavier was reading a book, and I was listening to English beside him. I was distracted after listening for a while, and couldn't help looking at his profile. I was so busy chasing Ryan that I didn't pay much attention to him. But it can't be blamed entirely on me. When I first came to school, I was willing to play with him, after all, we grew up together. But he was too busy, and he became eccentric and withdrawn when he grew up. Every time we met, I talked nonstop, and he just said After a long time, I found it boring, and gradually I rarely contacted and met him. Later, I met Ryan, who was gentle, funny, and gentlemanly, completely different from Xavier. It's not surprising that young girls would like such boys. Maybe my eyes stayed on his face for too long. He suddenly closed the book, took off his glasses, and turned to look at me. The handsome face in my sights suddenly enlarged, and my whole heart was about to jump out. What are you looking at? No, nothing. I hurriedly looked away, but Xavier suddenly chuckled. Ivy, this was the first time he called me like this. Oh, it wasn't the first time, I often called him like this when I was a child, but when I grew up, I always called him Ivy politely. What happened? Let's have dinner together tonight. Oh, okay. Xavier's smile deepened, he raised his hand and gently touched the top of my head. If you want to eat something, send me a WeChat message. But I broke the appointment in the evening. In the afternoon, Ryan suddenly sent me a WeChat message. Have you forgotten Cherry? This sentence, may be inexplicable to others, but it made me feel like I was falling into an ice cave. I almost called Ryan immediately. Ryan, Ivy, my guess was right, you are the same as me. Ryan, what do you mean by that? Ryan laughed deeply on the other side of the receiver, and he even deliberately prolonged his tone. Wife, if you want to know how Cherry is doing after you die, then meet me, I'll wait for you at the back door of the school. Ryan hung up the phone after he finished speaking. I stared at this number and wanted to block and delete it directly. Whether it was something from the previous life or a parallel world, it had nothing to do with Ivy now. I am only 21 years old now, and there is no daughter Cherry in my life. How she lived in that imaginary world, what does it have to do with me now? But I sat there, tears slowly flowing out without knowing when. I remember the night before giving birth, my little daughter lay on the side of my bed, hugged me and kept kissing me. She asked me a little anxiously, Mom, will you not love me after giving birth to a little brother? Grandpa and Grandma talk about the little brother every day, and they forgot my birthday. Mom, I will be very good in the future. I will help you take care of the little brother. Don't dislike Cherry, okay? At that time, I was tortured by the pain of labor and didn't care to comfort her emotions. When she was finally taken out of the ward, she kept looking back at me with tears in her eyes. When I saw Ryan, he was leaning against the wall smoking. "Wife, I knew you would come." He seemed to have drunk a lot of wine and stumbled over to hug me. I pushed him away and took a step back. "Ryan, what do you want to tell me?" Ryan looked at me for a long time before he said slowly, "Ivy, you are obviously my wife, and you have slept with me and had children with me. Why do you reject my confession and get so close to Xavier now?" I turned around and was about to leave. Ryan suddenly stopped me. "Wife, less than a year after you died, Cherry slipped and fell from the windowsill." "What did you say?" I turned around and looked at Ryan in disbelief, shaking all over. In my previous life, Ryan and I lived on the 11th floor of the top floor. 11th floor, how could we survive if we fell down? You lied to me, didn't you? All the windowsills and balconies in our house have protective nets. Cherry was 8 years old at that time. How could she have fallen down? But there are always accidents. That's the fact. Ryan looked at me with tears in his eyes. It's just that she was lucky at that time. She fell on the awning of a middle floor. So she didn't die. She's still alive, right? You want to know? Ryan slowly stretched out his hand and spread his palm. I saw Cherry's hairpin, a hairpin stained with her blood. Ryan? I looked at him in astonishment, unable to believe what I saw. Why is Cherry's hairpin in Ryan's hand in this time and space? "Ivy, as long as you stay with me, I will tell you what happened to our daughter." Ryan looked at me with determination. "Maybe it's because of this hairpin with her blood that I always know something about my daughter." "Ryan, you obviously don't like me. Why don't you chase Lana, but instead pester me, Ivy? After all, we are a couple who have been together for many years. How could I have no feelings for you?" I admit that I was attracted to Lana's appearance. But then I thought about it for a long time, and I and you are the most suitable, Ivy. Weren't you happy marrying me in your last life? He gently held my shoulders, lowered his voice and coaxed me gently. You love me very much. As long as we swear to be together, we will get married and give birth to our daughter Cherry. In this world, Cherry will not lose her mother, nor will she fall from the upstairs. She will have a complete and happy family. What do you think, okay? The moment he leaned over to kiss me, I pushed him away fiercely, raised my hand and slapped him in the face. Ryan was stunned for a moment. He covered his face. His eyes gloomy. "Ivy, you'd better think clearly, your daughter is still suffering now." "Yes, she is suffering and being wronged in another world. I can't do anything about it. Why should I foolishly repeat the tragedy in this time and space?" I looked at Ryan and really wanted to tear his hypocritical face apart. I remembered why he had to force me to stay with him. Because he was facing graduation internship and was too busy to take care of himself. His mother will soon come to Beijing for treatment due to illness, and his sister-in-law who dropped out of school will accompany her. In that life, I took care of his family personally so that he would not have to worry about the future. I rented the house. Ryan had no money, and I paid the medical expenses first, but later, it was naturally nothing. Now he still has nothing, so there must be someone to pave the way for him, and it is naturally me, the big enemy in the previous life. Don't you want to go back and accompany her? Ivy, in that time and space, I will marry Lana and have children again. As for Cherry, a disabled person who may be paralyzed from a high position after falling, have you thought about what will happen to her for the rest of her life? I want to go back and take my poor daughter away, but I don't believe Ryan. The past is gone, and it can't be pursued. Then we can only hope that in that time and space, her biological father still has a trace of conscience. After I finished speaking, I turned around and left without stopping. The phone rang several times, and I knew Xavier was looking for me. But I don't know what kind of mood I should use to face him now. If you say you can really let it go completely, you can only deceive others. After all, she is my own flesh and blood, the daughter I have raised for 7 years. She is still alive and has suffered in a different time and space, but I can't do anything now. I just want to be alone for a while. Ivy, what if I can get you back to that world, back to my daughter's side? Ryan's words are like the devil's bait, which made me stop unconsciously. I admit that I was bewitched by Ryan's words. In my previous life, I couldn't play with him who was meticulous and deep-minded, and I was deceived by his false feelings wrapped in sweet words for a lifetime. In this life, no matter how I resisted and guarded, I still fell into the trap that Ryan had carefully dug. You have to force me to use such means. Ryan sighed softly and stroked my face. My limbs were soft and I couldn't use any strength. I could only open my eyes in vain and look at Ryan standing by the bed. He took out his mobile phone and took pictures of me from various angles. He unbuttoned my clothes one by one. I wanted to struggle, but I didn't have the strength. Ryan's movements suddenly stopped again. Ivy, you rejected me, besides because of Lana. Is there another reason for Xavier? No wonder in the last life. Ryan suddenly stopped and sneered again. He likes you, so he never got married in the last life. In this life, as soon as you rejected me, he intervened. Xavier, I didn't have any strength in my body, but my mind was very clear. When I followed Ryan away just now, although I was extremely anxious, I still kept my guard. When Ryan was not paying attention, I quietly sent a WeChat message to Xavier. There were only 2 words, brother. That was our code when we were young. Young Xavier once said to me, Ivy, when you are scared, as long as you call me brother, I will find you no matter where I am and save you. I don't know if he still remembers this little agreement between us, but subconsciously, I always feel that he will come. Until Ryan unbuttoned the last button of my shirt and was about to continue taking pictures, the door was suddenly kicked open from outside. Ivy. I heard Xavier's voice, as if it came from another world. So far, yet so close. Brother is here. It seemed as if the whole world suddenly became quiet. Xavier's face appeared in my sight, and my heart suddenly fell to the ground. Nestling in Xavier's arms, my body became hotter and hotter, and my cheeks were flushed. He took cool mineral water to feed me, and I drank half a bottle in one go, but still shook my head in pain and heat. My fingertips felt a cool and smooth touch, which made me feel like I had found sweet rain. I couldn't help but greedily caress it again, and even wanted to put my hot body on it. But Xavier's slender hands suddenly grabbed my hot fingertips. Ivy, bear it. What to bear? I opened my eyes hazily, and a pair of dark but deep eyes were reflected in my sight. I smelled a faint cool mint scent. The fingers holding my hand were imprinted on my wrist, as if the tightest string in my body was suddenly cut off. Brother. I murmured, raised my face and kissed Xavier on the lips. Ivy, he clenched my wrist bones and tried to push me away, but I had already tasted the cool water source and had lost all my reason. Brother, can you give me some water? I murmured incoherently, broke free of his hand, hooked his neck and leaned against him, deepening the kiss. I lay on Xavier's big bed, looking at him with wide eyes, a little dissatisfied. My body was still very hot, and I felt uncomfortable. Xavier casually put on a pair of pajamas and got out of bed, and brought water to feed me, but I didn't want water. He seemed a little afraid to look at me, and coughed lightly. Ivy. I looked at his red ears and the marks on his neck that I had bitten. My heart was getting more and more itchy. Brother, I want more. I pushed the water cup away, knelt up and hugged him again. He looked down at me, and his eyes gradually filled with boundless tenderness. Okay. Don't be so fast. Isn't that right? Sounding aggrieved and dissatisfied, Xavier turned over and pressed me on the bed. Ivy, you'd better not beg for mercy. It was almost dawn, the originally burning fingertips finally returned to normal temperature. Xavier's hair on his forehead was so soaked. His slender fingers were entangled with my long hair, and it took a while to separate. Do you want some water? He held me in his arms, his voice gentle and low. Yes, I do. I said tiredly, and hurriedly grabbed his arm to explain, I just want to drink water, nothing else. Xavier's eyes were immediately filled with a big smile. He leaned over and kissed my sweaty forehead. I'm not a god. I watched him get up and get me some water. After my body returned to normal, my mind began to get tangled again. To be honest, I did think about marrying Xavier in the future when I was a child. After all, he looks good and treats me well. But later, when we grew up, he gradually became cold and indifferent because of his parents' divorce and his mother's death. I am a cheerful person, so it's normal for men not to like him. But now, we have the closest relationship, although there are external forces. But no matter what, the relationship between Xavier and I has changed in the most substantial way. I have to think about what to do next. What are you thinking about? Xavier brought the water over. He naturally held me in his arms and fed me. After drinking the water, I looked at him hesitantly. Well, he leaned over and put down the cup. But he held my hand hanging by my side, interlocking our fingers. When you were young, you said you would marry me, Ivy. When I was young, I didn't know anything, suddenly felt a little sad. But I didn't know where this sadness came from. In fact, when I was young and ignorant, I secretly liked him. But the mind of a girl is delicate and sensitive. I couldn't stand his silence and coldness. What about now? You should be sensible now. Xavier held my hand and lowered his head to look at my face. Ivy, you are an adult, and adults are responsible for their actions. After he said that, a faint red appeared at the end of his eyes, and he looked a little aggrieved. You can't abandon me after having sex. You can't turn your face and deny it after putting on a skirt. I don't mean that. So you mean you will be responsible for me? Do men also need to be responsible? But I dare not ask. How cold and unapproachable Xavier is in normal days, now he looks so pitiful. Must be responsible. You don't want to be responsible for me? No. Xavier hugged me gently with red eyes. His chin rested on my shoulder and rubbed it lightly. Ivy, I have been lonely since my mother passed away. Thinking of Aunt Leong, my heart ached instantly. When I was a child, Aunt Leong was so good to me. Later, when she died unexpectedly, I also went to see her off for the last time. Xavier didn't shed a single tear in front of the grave at that time. Some people say that he is cold-blooded, maybe he is destined to be a lonely star. I couldn't help but hug him tightly. He has no mother. How can a child without a mother not be lonely and sad, just like my Cherry in another world? She is lying alone in the hospital now. Is she lonely? Is she afraid? But I can't even give her a hug. Ivy, are you crying? Xavier, do you think there is a regret pill in this world? Ivy, just have a clear conscience. Yes, have a clear conscience. I have given my heart and soul. I have never let anyone down. I have never hurt anyone. The one who should suffer should not be me, just like the movies of Stephen Chow that I like. His movies have ridiculed and mocked many things in this world, but they never ridiculed love. Ivy, have a clear conscience in my last life and this life. Good people will definitely be rewarded, and bad people will definitely have their retribution. Ivy, do you believe me? Xavier's eyes were too clear, but so firm that it was impossible not to be convinced. I finally nodded. Xavier gently touched my hair. What do you want to eat? I'll make it for you, fried rice with egg, the simplest kind. He smiled at me. Okay. I thought about it for a long time and discussed it with Xavier. In the end, I decided to hand over the evidence left by the mobile phone recording to the police. People like Ryan will do anything to achieve their goals. He can plot against me today, and he may plot against other innocent girls in the future. He had already obtained an internship qualification at a very famous hospital. He will definitely have a bright future in the future, just like in his previous life. He will gain a foothold in Beijing and take root. But now everything that was within his reach has been destroyed because of these recordings. The whole school reported his criticism and expelled him from the school. After studying hard for several years and 4 years in college, he got nothing at the last minute. When the police came to take him away, Xavier and I stood in the crowd. Ryan looked back from time to time, as if he was looking for something. Until the end, his eyes met mine in the crowd. He suddenly struggled violently and shouted my name frantically. Ivy. Ivy, you vicious woman, no wonder you will die a miserable death and your daughter will become disabled. The crowd was walking, and some classmates who knew me looked at me with surprise and pointed at me. Ryan was quickly subdued by the police and put into the police car. But the moment he got into the car, the hairpin in his pocket suddenly fell out. No one noticed the small hairpin that fell. The car drove away, and I walked forward, squatted on the ground and picked up the hairpin. There was still blood from my daughter on it. The moment I held the hairpin, my heart couldn't help but pierce violently. The pain made me unable to stand up straight, and the pain made my whole body spasm. Ivy, what's wrong with you? Xavier was terrified, picked me up and shouted for someone to call an ambulance. The sharp corner of the hairpin pierced my palm, and the blood in the wound slowly soaked into the originally dried bloodstains. There were large patches of white light flashing in front of my eyes, and there was a harsh buzzing sound like a war in my ears. Xavier kept shouting my name, but my consciousness seemed to be pulled away, and gradually fell into a dark chaos. What should we do? The doctor said Cherry might become paraplegic. This is a bottomless pit. The figures in my sight gradually became clear. I floated in the air and gradually saw those figures clearly. They were my parents-in-law pacing back and forth outside the operating room. They were whispering something in a low voice. Or, the father-in-law looked at the mother-in-law, or, forget it. If she is really paraplegic, she will suffer if she lives. Alas, I really loved her in vain. Yes, you said that this child is more than 7 years old. Why is she so naughty? I think she is unlucky. She killed her mother and brother, and she didn't have a good ending either. It's really unlucky for our son to meet them. He is in his 40s and still has no children. Old man, I won't hide it from you now. Our Ryan has a son, and it was Lana who gave birth to him. My mother-in-law looked around slyly, and whispered in my father-in-law's ear, she's already 6 months old, and looks exactly like our Ryan when he was a child. 6 months? My father-in-law was shocked. She was already pregnant before her mother died? Yes, that's why Ryan and I kept it a secret, just because we were afraid you would let it slip. What if the in-laws knew about it? So, we have to keep it a secret now. I was floating in the air, listening to their conversation, and I was so calm that I was shocked even by myself. But I originally thought that Lana and Ryan were together after I died. But now it seems that I was really naive and stupid. When Lana came to Beijing and I invited her to stay at home, she and Ryan had already been secretly together. I don't really care about these things now, I'm just worried about Cherry. But I can't get into the intensive care unit, so I can only wait outside. As time passed, my parents-in-law gradually stopped coming. Ryan used to come once a week, but later, it became half a month, and then a month. I heard the nurse calling Ryan, urging him to renew the fee again and again. Later, my daughter was sent out of the intensive care unit, lying in the cold and noisy corridor with tubes all over her body. No one from Ryan's family came, and no one renewed her fee. She might have had a glimmer of hope, but now it was completely strangled by her loved ones. Cherry has been sleeping soundly, very quiet and very well behaved. I stayed by her bedside, wanting to touch her little face. Unfortunately, even such a small wish could not be fulfilled. 3 days later, my elderly mother came to the hospital. She took out her savings to renew Cherry's fee. But it was still a drop in the bucket. I looked at my mother's old and haggard face and her swollen eyes, and my heart was broken. They had complained about me countless times. But in the end, they still accepted my choice unconditionally and worried about me. I am the only daughter. Now that I am dead, who will take care of them in their old age? Mother sat by Cherry's bed, wiping her tears and talking nonstop. Cherry, Grandma is old and not in good health. Your mother is gone, and your grandpa is still sick in bed. He can't come to see you, but he's thinking about you in his heart. Grandma is incompetent, doesn't make a lot of money, and can't save you. Grandma really wants to feel pain for you, really wants to lie here for you. I died, I couldn't even cry. My dear ones are right in front of me, I watch them suffer, but I can't even give them a hug. Why, people who have done nothing wrong have such a tragic ending. Ryan and Lana, as well as their children and parents, can now enjoy the happiness of family life. Didn't Xavier tell me that good people will definitely be rewarded? Didn't he tell me to believe him? Maybe it was because I thought of Xavier, I actually saw him in the hospital. At that time, I thought it was my illusion. But when he stood by Cherry's bed, I looked at his handsome but dusty face and couldn't believe it for a moment. He bent down and gently stroked Cherry's little face. He seemed to whisper her name again, but I only heard a very low Sakura. I followed him and watched him go through the transfer procedures for Cherry. I watched him carefully put Cherry on the ambulance for transfer. I watched him negotiate with Ryan, who came after hearing the news. I watched Ryan pretend to cry about his difficulties and shirk responsibility. Until the end, Xavier said the only sentence: Cherry's future treatment and rehabilitation do not need your Ryan family to take care of it. I will pay for all her expenses. If she has to lie in bed for the rest of her life, I will take care of her until I, Xavier, leave this world. As he promised, he put almost all his thoughts on Cherry's treatment and rehabilitation. And the miracle finally happened half a year later. My Cherry woke up, and gradually, she could even say a few vague words. Another long half-year passed, and she could even stand for a few seconds with the help of a nurse. During this year, Xavier secretly did another thing. He was investigating the truth of Cherry's fall from the building. Hard work pays off, and he actually caught some clues. That year, the brother and sister's death case that shocked the country was making a lot of noise on the internet. Even if I am a ghost, I have heard about it. But I never thought that Ryan would be so cruel that he could even kill his own daughter. My Cherry did not fall off the windowsill by accident, but was thrown down by her biological father Ryan, and Lana said in their confessions. The reason why he was so obsessed and did such a thing was because Cherry often cried and wanted to find her mother. He tried to make Cherry accept Lana, but every time they met, they parted unhappily. Lana gradually became dissatisfied in her heart. When she was 7 months pregnant, she still shouted that she wanted to abort the child and break up with Ryan. When Cherry cried and wanted to find me again, Ryan lost control and started to fight. He was arrested for intentional homicide. Lana was acquitted. After all, in the matter of Cherry, although Lana complained that Cherry didn't like her, she didn't instigate Ryan to do anything. Ryan was taken away by the police. His parents couldn't bear the blow and both fell ill. Lana sold the property and took her son back to her hometown. It's just a pity that there was an accident on the highway on the way back. At this moment, I suddenly understood. Why did Xavier swear to me so confidently that good people will definitely be rewarded, and bad people will definitely have their retribution? It turned out that the final ending in the previous life was like this. 3 years later, my Cherry recovered and returned to school. She can run and jump, not to mention how lovely she is. And I, who had been wandering in that time and space for several years, can finally let go of my daughter's thoughts. I went back to Xavier. Actually, I was only unconscious for half a day. But Xavier was obviously terrified. I have never seen such a clingy person in the world. If he couldn't help me go to the bathroom, I might not have to walk a single step. You will spoil me like this. I lay on the bed, drinking milk tea and eating fried chicken, watching TV series under a small blanket. In between his busy schedule, Xavier would come over from time to time to feed me washed and cut fruits. If I become a useless little guy who never touches the water, don't regret it. Do you marry a wife to let her do housework and treat her as a servant? Xavier put the watermelon to my mouth. I was a little stunned. Yes, is marriage to turn yourself into a busy free nanny? When did I lose everything about myself and become a tool person who revolves around Ryan's family? Sometimes I would feel wronged and dissatisfied, but Ryan would always coax me, Ivy, I am also doing this for our future, for our children to win at the starting line in the future, so now I can only wrong you and make you work harder. This grievance and hardship lasted for more than 10 years. Later, he became rich, and we moved to a big house and a luxury car. But I still couldn't bear to spend money to enjoy, and I was always around the children and the kitchen. Ivy, I just hope you can live happily every day. Xavier wiped the juice from the corner of my mouth with a tissue. You watch the show for a while, I will take you out for a walk after I'm done. At the age of 22, Xavier and I got a marriage certificate. Our wedding was scheduled in October after I graduated. Xavier took me to his mother's grave to pay homage. We showed them the marriage certificate to my mother. Mom, I will treat Xavier very well in the future. I will always love him and accompany him. He will never be alone again. Mom, I married the little girl you like as my daughter-in-law. If you know it, you must be very happy. Just the little girl that Mom likes? I glanced at him, a little unhappy. Xavier held my hand and held it tightly in his palm. I like her too. I have liked her for many, many years. I know that you have been thinking about marrying me since you were a child. Snuggled into his arms, and he smiled and lowered his head to kiss me. So this is what it feels like when your dreams come true when you are young. What does it feel like? It's like having a beautiful dream. 23. When I was 24 years old, I got pregnant. Xavier was more nervous than ever before. I found that he often couldn't sleep in the middle of the night, so he sat by the bed and looked at me. Sometimes he would hold my hand, and even his whole body would tremble slightly. I tried to comfort him, but it was ineffective, even though every time I had a prenatal checkup, the doctor said that my physical condition was very good and asked him to relax a little, but he still often woke up from nightmares. Later, I accompanied him to Puji Temple. We went to draw lots, and we got the best lot. An old monk with a kind face told us that we were husband and wife for 3 lifetimes and would stay together until we were old. After returning from Puji Temple, he obviously slept much more peacefully. But in the late pregnancy, when my belly was already very big, he began to be restless all night. I had no choice but to anxiously hope that the pregnancy would end soon and the baby would be born soon. Let my Xavier sleep peacefully. In the last 2 weeks, Xavier was a little crazy. He lost almost 15 pounds. There was no way to continue working, so he simply took a leave to accompany me wholeheartedly. Once I was half asleep and half awake, I heard him calling my name. Ivy, I responded dazedly and felt my hand being held tightly by him. We only want this one child, and we won't have any more. I'm scared, honey, you can't imagine how scared I am. I could vaguely guess something. Maybe Xavier, like me, came from another world. But I didn't ask. The ending of the other world is set, and we can't change it. But in this world, Xavier and I will be together for life. I gave birth to a very beautiful daughter. Her lips are red, like a cherry. Xavier held her and looked at her, then put her in the crib and came to hold me. Wife, let's call her Cherry, okay? I looked at him and smiled. Cherry, it sounds so nice, I like eating cherry the most. I like it too. He hugged me tightly, slowly lowered his head, and kissed me on the lips. Cherry in the crib waved her little hands, opened her eyes and looked at her kissing father and mother. She fell asleep again with a sweet smile on her lips. It seems that the little girl is very satisfied with the parents she chose in heaven.